Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Indiana Bond Bank webinar. As we get started here, just a friendly reminder, we have muted all lines. So if you have a question, please use the Q&A box and our panelists today will answer your questions. Also, we are recording today's session for future use. On that note, I'd like to hand it over to Mark Woolner, Executive Director of the Indiana Bond Bank. Mark, all yours.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Crow, for hosting this webinar. We really sincerely appreciate it. Welcome, everyone, to the Indiana Bond Bank webinar on bond bank resources to help keep Indiana units of government thriving during COVID-19. And in particular, we've identified one resource that we think may be of use to many entities around the state in terms of local government, from cities and towns to schools, libraries, police and fire districts, park districts, and the like. And before we really dive deeper into that, we are lucky to have strong support of the Bond Bank. In fact, the chair of the Bond Bank board is with us, Indiana Treasurer of State Kelly Mitchell. Kelly Mitchell serves as the chair of the Indiana Bond Bank board, as I mentioned. She was elected as the 55th treasurer of the state of Indiana in 2014 and was reelected in 2018. In addition to serving as the chair of the Indiana Bond Bank board, Treasurer Mitchell serves as the chair of the state E911 board, the Indiana Education Savings Authority, the ABLE Authority, and is the sole trustee of the State Police Pension Trust, among a number of other positions. And as the chief investment officer of the state, she is responsible for management of approximately $5 to $7 billion on a daily basis. Treasurer Mitchell has a heart for local government. For 7 years prior to becoming state treasurer, she worked in the treasurer's office as the director of Trust Indiana, which many of you know is Indiana's local government investment pool. And prior to that, she was county commissioner for 8 years in Cass County, Indiana. With that, I'd like to welcome Treasurer Mitchell.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Did I unmute the mic correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I do hope you are all staying safe and well. Thank you for taking time out of what I know is a very full schedule to join this webinar this afternoon. As chair of the Indiana Bond Bank, I wanted to highlight this very timely resource as we all strategize the best path forward for Hoosiers. I am indeed a former Cass County Commissioner, and I understand the financial challenges our communities are facing. This program helps assist local governments, that's you, as you strive to continue providing the same level of excellence to your constituents during this uncertain time. Again, I appreciate the effort you are making just in being here today on behalf of the communities you serve. I and the IBB team, we take seriously our mission to deliver financial solutions to local units of government. We are glad to partner with you as you serve your communities. With that, I will turn the mic back to Mark Wellner, our Executive Director of the Indiana Bond Bank, to discuss the Advanced Refunding Program and how it may benefit your community. Again, thank you for being here and stay well. Thank you all.
Thank you, Treasurer. And Indiana Bond Bank echoes the sentiment. I hope you're all doing well and safe. You know, as the Bond Bank thinks about this time that we are now living in the state of Indiana, you know, we really look to see how we might look at our resources and find ways we might help be part of the solutions to challenges that you may be facing during this time. Some of you may have worked with the Bond Bank in the past, from anything as potentially small as adding new snow plows or police vehicles to your communities or school buses. You may have used the Bond Bank's capital equipment lease purchase program for that. Or you may have come through the Bond Bank for a longer term bond issuance or anything in between, such as construction financing for rural development infrastructure projects. One resource as you think about the Bond Bank is we really exist as your state counterpart. We live for local government, and local government, as I said before, all shapes and sizes. That's from smallest townships to cities and towns, to the county level, to schools. All those fundamental pieces of kind of the fabric of our communities are the customers and the clients and the partners of the Indiana Bond Bank. And so whether you've worked with us in the past or this is your first time hearing about the bond bank, I want you to know that we are a public sector entity that strives on a daily basis to provide, as the treasurer said, targeted solutions to the custom needs that you may all be facing. Our team has 4 goals for this webinar. One is kind of to introduce you to the Executive Order 20-05, which was a governor's executive order in response to COVID-19. The second is talking about an awareness of the bond bank has a time-tested 30-year-old tool that may assist you in weathering some of the storms that may be related to COVID-19. And third is just to do a deeper dive into the ways we've streamlined our application and the process for participating in that program, should it be a need for you. And fourth, hope to have a healthy dialogue and engage in some good question and answer. You'll find this PowerPoint and this webinar to be interactive at times, and the first interactive opportunity is coming up very quickly. Alicia, if we can advance to the next slide, I just want to help you. I always think it helps to put names with faces. We've got a team around Advanced Funding Program, this mid-year program. I think many of these faces may be familiar. Our team has worked in and with local governments for many years. As I mentioned, this program has existed since 1989, and so you're working with and getting access to just some of the highest quality people in and around the public sector who've worked to streamline a program and make it efficient to your needs. So you've got myself, the Executive Director of the Bond Bank. We're joined on the phone also by Ron Mangus, our Director of Operations. Dennis Otten is the local unit of government counsel from Bose, McKinney & Evans, LLP. Angie Steno is the Bond Bank Municipal Advisor from Crow, LLP. And Bradley Bingham is Bond Counsel with Barnes & Thornburg. So as promised, we have our first opportunity for a polling question. And if we do this right, there should be a polling screen come up here for everyone. So we'd like to get to know who's joining us on the phone. What's your role? Are you an elected official, local government employee, an MA, legal counsel, another provider, or an other? Pick the one that fits you best, and that'll help give us a sense of direction in terms of who we're speaking with and who we're interacting with. And we'll leave that open for, what, another 15 seconds, Alicia? Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Perfect. I don't know if everyone can see on the screen, so it looks like we've got about 65% are local government employees, business managers, CFOs, accountants, and that's fantastic. So as we move into the first order of business, our first goal for the call is really to make sure that wherever you sit in this, excuse me, in the spectrum of local government, that you're aware of Executive Order 2005. That was issued just over 2 weeks ago, and it requires counties to waive penalties on property tax payments. These are non-escrowed property tax payments made after May 11th. There's a 60-day window of waived penalties on property tax payments. And so as we're hearing from many of you have already reached out, and some of you may be contemplating internally what this means for your projected revenue and your expenditures. Of course, many of you budgeted to have a certain amount come in with the May 11th payments. And now this leaves open the possibility that those may not all come in when you expected them. And so this could create a mismatch in timing between revenues coming in and expenditures going out. Alicia, we can continue to advance the slide. And this kind of teases where we are going next. Let's bring up the poll. How familiar are you with the concept of a tax anticipation warrant? Give another 10 seconds here. Perfect. All right, very good. So we've got results around the board. So 47% familiar with the concept of a tax anticipation warrant, haven't used them in the past, which is good and not surprising for Indiana and the robust state of our local economies and I think that speaks well to your ability to anticipate revenues and budget. Others are familiar and have used, and perhaps some of you have used our advanced funding program to issue those warrants in the past. Others are familiar, but familiar and have used. So it looks like in terms of usage, we've got, if I'm doing my math right, about 32% are familiar with the program at some level and have used it. And about 17% are not familiar with the program. So let's just jump right into what this, what the Indiana Bond Bank program was. And so what we call our tax anticipation warrant, you'll hear the term advanced funding, mid-year program. Really what we're doing here is issuing these short-term tax anticipation warrants. So you're anticipating taxes coming in, and it essentially helps you smooth your cash flow, your cash stream. So if you have, with distributions coming when they do, you may have expenditures that come before those distributions. You know the revenue's coming, but it just doesn't come in a timely fashion or in the right timing for you to meet those expenditure needs. And so what the bond bank does is help you look at when those cash flow deficits occur and helps you fill the gap during those times. These are very short-term borrowings. The benefit of coming through the bond bank program, I think are two or threefold, should you need to use the tool. One, I mentioned this tool has been in use since 1989, which, is over 30 years now. And so the tool is time tested. It is resilient. We have scaled up in the past to meet needs. Some of you may remember from 2003 to 2009, there were delays in reassessments, which really affected municipal cash flow. And we served multiple hundreds of units of government during certain years in the 2003 to 2009 period. When the need was really significant, just due again to that mismatch in timing and delays in revenues hitting your coffers. Again, I think the second thing I would stress is that while you may be able to find a tax anticipation warrant, perhaps from your local bank, local financial institution, and we would encourage you to do that if you'd like to, you gain more efficient market access by pooling. So this is a program that we have well-oiled to occur twice a year. We're not reinventing the wheel, and you're able to share all your operational costs and overhead with this transaction with every other participant. And so you're not bearing that burden alone as if you would if you were to do this on an individual basis. And I think the third thing is it's a hands-on program. If there's anyone on this who's willing to share in the chat function or in the Q&A their experience with the advanced funding program, not having known if anybody's on here, I'm willing to bet that the feedback that we will get on this chat and the feedback we consistently get as the bond bank team is hands-on. We provide hands-on assistance in completing all the documents, any cash flow assistance, application assistance. This is what our team does day in and day out on a daily basis. We know and we recognize that you have 9 other irons in the fire, and this is not what you do on a daily basis. And so we really wrap our team around you and help carry you over the finish line with the advanced funding program. I don't see any questions specific about the program. If you do have questions, as Alicia said, please just drop them in the box. I see we have one broader question about different types of assistance, which we will circle back to. So I do see that question, and we'll continue. We'll ensure that we answer that. But if you have a question in the meantime about what the program is or how it functions, don't hesitate to add it, because I'm sure someone else is thinking that very question right now. So let's pull back the camera lens and just really big picture, look at what advance funding is. I think if you anticipate as a unit of government, as you're looking at when your revenues are coming in and how much may be coming in through those escrowed payments. So think about residential property taxes paid with a mortgage. That will still be coming in. It still is due on May 11th. It's kind of those non-escrowed payments that where penalties are waived. So that could, those may be coming later than anticipated. So step one is if you think you may have a need for the program, we have a one-page participation survey on our website. That's non-binding, but it allows you to raise your hand and tell us, hey, we think we might need to use the program. We want to be on your radar. We're going to be reaching out to you for assistance. And that tells the bond bank team that you're interested. It also allows you to signal which month and what time of the spring or summer period you may need funds. That helps us ramp up and streamline our program. If you do reach out, we will make sure to send an application packet to you, which will contain everything you need to participate in the program. You work through and complete the application for the program. And again, our team is available, standing by to assist. And on this third bullet, we'll dive a little bit more into what the application consists of in just a few minutes here on the webinar. So you'll get a chance to look and kind of take a look and a tour through the documents. I think you'll really see how we've streamlined the data and the application so that this is just as easy as possible for you. Hand in glove with that, we'll review your application and cash flows, make sure we understand everything, help you set what a maximum borrowing amount may be, and then we work toward closing. And so financial assistance gets dispersed to you, the local government. And this is a process that we've worked here for over 30 years. And so it's got an infrastructure and a team, but we've not been sitting on our laurels, and we've not just let the program be as it is, because we know we're in unique times. And so Alicia, if we can go to the next slide, I want to share what's important to us is that we remain nimble to meet your needs during this time. And so one enhancement that we've done is offering 4 different lanes for you to join the program, because we know this may hit you at different times, if at all. But we intend to offer 4 closing dates so that you don't need to borrow before you need to borrow, and that we will also allow, and I don't know if this slide says, but we're going to make sure that after a date certain, these are prepayable without penalty. So again, you're not into a borrowing longer than you need to be. If you do want a traditional 6-month tax anticipation warrant, we can certainly fill that need. If your cash flow blip is just, say, 2 months, we'll make sure that we can accommodate that as well. We're really here to serve, here to help, and have really strived over the past few days, few weeks to customize this program to meet this particular need with COVID-19. I think we can even jump into that overall schedule, which would be the next slide. That bottom line, I think, the bottom line and the top line are kind of what to look at. So we have those four potential closings. So if you need money early May, we have it structured so applications by the end of this week, we could distribute funds by May 7th. And as you see, we have scheduled May 28th, end of June, and end of July opportunities for disbursement. And now I think we're going to hit a polling question here soon. As we continue to gather data and information and hear from you, this schedule remains flexible to your needs. And so should we hear more requests or demand for closings later in the months of August or September, October, certainly we want to be responsive to those as well. But out of the gate, we want to scale up to accommodate needs across the spring and summer. And I think we've done that with these potential closing dates. I think this would be a great time, Alicia, to go right into that next polling question. Let's presume you think you might need cash flow assistance, give us a sense of when that might be. So the first 4 options you see are the ones that we already have pre-scheduled. They're early May, late May, June, and July. And we've also offered some other alternatives farther out to get a sense of just what you're projecting at each local unit. Let's leave that open for, say, 15 seconds, Alicia, and then get a sense of results. Maybe we can talk through those. All right, very good. Well, thank you. This is fantastic to see. Not surprisingly, June 2020 has captured about 40% there of the need. And that tracks pretty well with what we're seeing actually with the participation surveys that have come in already, that bell curve. We've had a handful of responses for the early May, a handful for the July, and really the bulk of need appears to be that late May and June. So this is consistent with what we're seeing. It's interesting that the August, September, December, we'll keep our eye on that. And I think the key maybe for our team is that unknown, because that tells me that, probably like many of you are thinking and trying to still assess and may not know until you start to receive some of those disbursements. You may not know until you start to, until the season continues and real numbers start to come in. So our team will keep our eye on that unknown, because some of that interest may materialize and become firm for a particular month, or you may realize you don't need the tool in the program, and that's even better for you. And so this is all really helpful. I'd say for needs that happen in that January 2021 timeframe or later, our normal advanced funding round will start up then again in January. If I didn't mention, this is a twice-a-year program, and so we'll also have that program scaled up to accommodate your need there. Let's jump in. Thank you to the participation survey. And this will also be a good time to answer a couple of questions. In fact, I saw one about the participation survey. And so if you remember that arrow flow chart, the first thing, if you take nothing else away from this webinar, if you have any potential interest in joining the program, navigating to our website and in that red box, completing a participation survey, which just tells us who you are and what month you may need funds, that's really your first step. And again, if you later find out as funds come in that you don't need this particular resource, that's fantastic. But what this does is just gives the bond bank kind of a pipeline of who we need to be out there talking with and working with and ensuring that you have everything you need should you choose to use the program. That participation survey is your first step. We do have a question with regard to the participation survey. Matt, you asked for the survey. If you've already completed the survey, but have since decided to use a later date of closing, do you need to redo the survey? I'm going to speak on behalf of our team. We do not need a new survey. So your survey is, you've raised your hand and you've told us you have a potential need. We will, I think it's make sure you communicate that with us just offline, and we'll make sure that we have you slotted in the right spot. So we will just make a note in our files and amend your participation survey on our end. All right. So why don't we Why don't we keep coming? So I think the last thing on the survey is if there's an ability to complete it online, you can complete the participation survey online. And you also have the available PDF fillable, and that can be emailed to the midyear@inbondbank.com website. Let's move a little bit forward, Alicia, and then we'll circle back. We've got some really good questions coming in. And just on this note, have you completed the participation survey? You should be seeing that poll here pop up. And I'm not seeing that poll, but we can. Here we go. Apologize for that. So beyond just a yes, no, just give us a little more insight to what you're thinking, and this helps us, again, plan to meet your needs. All right, let's see what we have. Very good, thank you. So as I look at this, some of you about 1 in 4 of you have already completed the survey and plan to apply to the program. And I think what comes next will be really helpful in terms of diving a little bit deeper into what the expectations are for the application and the cash flow survey and how our team will help with that. Another 57%, 60%, I think are voicing what we expect, which is you have not, and you're not certain whether you will or not. So you're just not certain about what the future holds. And we certainly empathize with that. We want you to know, if you get nothing else from this, that we are here as a resource. Should you experience a mismatch in timing between revenues and expenditures, there is a home for you here, and our team is ready, willing, and able to assist. And you're not just held to a May funding round. So should you get more information and data and determine you need some assistance, our team here at the state, at the bond bank, are here to assist come June and July. And so that participation survey will remain open, and we'll continue to receive those and work with you throughout the spring and the summer. We really appreciate you who are unsure. I think it speaks highly to you're getting out in front of things and looking for resources just to be safe and secure. So this is all really helpful. Thank you. Very good. We got one last slide, and then we've got a good break for question and answer. So this next slide, the application overview, really 2 components. It's a credit application. A lot of it is kind of who you are and who our point of contact is. It may seem kind of rote, and especially if you worked with the bond bank before, we do have a lot of that information, but we know with changing times, those typical office phone numbers are probably not, or may not be going to the right spot. So just making sure that we're talking to the right people. We've got the best point of contact in these interesting times. And then you can share a little bit more, the date the funds are needed, a little bit more kind of classic debt profile, operating profile, economic profile information that you would expect with any borrowing. I think what you'll see, and as Angie walks through the application, hopefully be able to see that we've really streamlined that process. So any data that we're able to pull on your behalf We know you are all working again on many, many other things. We have pulled that onto our team to get that information for you. So again, want to make this as streamlined as possible for you. Jumping to the right of the screen, the cash flow. That cash flow is really just gives us a look very simply at your historical revenues and expenditures and what you project. And really we use that to help size a potential borrowing need. And we can talk a little bit more about that. You can actually see what a cash flow looks like here in just a few moments. I think we are now ready to hit question and answer section. And I think what I'll first do is, Ron, if you are on and available, I know you are the keeper of our FAQ. So we've had questions come in over these last couple of weeks. I think it may be helpful to start just hitting a few high-level FAQ because those may be questions that you're thinking about or want to ask. And then if we have not answered your questions in the high-level FAQ overview, we will tackle them here as they come in on the Q&A box here on the meeting.
Sure. This is, as Mark said, this is Ron Mangus. I'm the Director of Operations with the Indiana Bond Bank, and I will hit a couple of the FAQs. One FAQ, just to back up a little bit on just what is the bond bank. Very quickly, the bond bank is not a bank, it's a quasi-state agency created to help local government. We get that question a lot. So just want to let you know that the bond bank was created by General Assembly to help local government borrow debt. The second, probably most common question is, what's the advantage of using the Indiana Bond Bank to issue tax anticipation warrants through the mid-year advanced funding program? The answer to that question is the bond bank has over 30 years of experience of issuing tax warrants. The bond bank will pool your tax warrants with other governmental entities, and you'll receive savings through economies of scale. In other words, the more entities that we have, the more savings that we can provide you through economies of scale. And finally, just note that the bond bank exempts the need to bid the financing. If you don't use the bond bank, you may need to competitively bid those tax warrants. I would certainly check with your local counsel to verify the bidding process if necessary for your tax warrants. A couple other common questions regarding the cash flow projection. Does my entity need to, what funds, or does my entity need to do cash flow projections for every fund? The answer to that question is you only need to do cash flow projections for the funds that you anticipate borrowing from. So for that, if you are a school corporation and you only need to borrow from the operation fund, then you only need to do cash flows for the operations fund. If you're a city or town and only need to borrow from your general fund, then you only need to do cash flows for the general fund. And again, you can borrow against any property tax fund that you receive property tax distribution from your county auditor. And also for school corporations, you can borrow against your tuition support. So those are some of the common questions. We will have these all posted on the website. There are several of those questions for you to review. But I will turn it back over to Mark to move forward, but those are some of the common questions.
Thank you, Ron. So we have a question. We'll just start from the top. Is the bond bank or another state agency providing assistance to local municipalities in regard to debt payments that have a repayment pledge other than property taxes, such as gaming, TIF, sales tax, water and sewer, et cetera? I think it's a great question. It recognizes that the advanced funding program is for those property tax payments. And so the bond bank, we're hearing some of that need, and I think we'd welcome feedback from you on that need. Really, the advanced funding program is designed for property taxes. We're hearing a lot about TIF. And so I think we're trying to gather more information to see if there might be an opportunity or a role for the bond bank to be responsive in that regard. Advanced funding currently, as it's structured and what we're talking about here for the mid-year program, is with regard to property taxes. So we'll keep I think if we can, I think I'd leave it. We'd like to keep a dialogue going offline if you have particular need with regard to another source of repayment or another repayment pledge. But for right now, the program we're talking about, it is property taxes. Dr. Thurston, you asked about the interest rate for the tax anticipation warrants, and that's a really good question, particularly if you've not used the program in the past. So the way the program works is we pull all our participants together, and then when the time comes to close, we are either going out to the open market or we are direct placing with a bank, whatever makes the most economic sense for our participants. And we're spreading that cost of issuance across all users. And so our spread to kind of those index interest rates is relatively tight. I don't know if I can be more specific than that, but we are, I think, have a historically demonstrate, and again, I can't control what the market's going to look like in May or June or July. And I don't want to make a promise of where we'll be. I'll just say that we'll use every effort to make the program as efficient and cost effective as possible. And again, I guess my point was just historically the bond bank, if you look at other tax anticipation warrants throughout the state, we perform very well on interest rate. And again, maybe others who have used the program can chime in with their experience on whether they were satisfied with the rates or not. Again, a lot of that comes down to us being effective and efficient on costs, and then kind of where that baseline index rate is on the day that we find the market. Eric, it looks like I got to your question a little too late. Will the program be posted or shared? I have to drop off for another conference. Sorry, Eric, we missed you. Yes, this is being recorded. As Alicia said at the beginning, we will have this hosted on our website and in other places. I'm sure a copy will be distributed out to everybody who registered for the webinar afterwards, so you can listen over to your heart's content, put your children to sleep at night, and all that good sort of thing. So yes, we will have this posted. Jeff, I see Jeff Spalding, your question regarding TIF revenue. I certainly hear your concern about that being at risk given the executive order. And I think if we can, love to talk offline about that issue again. I had a question about, can the borrowing be extremely short if our auditors think we will get our advanced draws in July, but we need the funds in June for debt payments? So our team is working on, that's a great question. Our team is working on the ability to prepay these tax anticipation warrants. The financing structure and the timing, I think we are still working through. We are working on, so big picture, we are working on prepayment. I don't think we can say specifically on the phone today that what a specific prepayment date may be or the ability to prepay. We are looking for offering, again, shorter borrowing. So if you need to get in and get out over a couple of months, we certainly want to try to accommodate that. And so we're building that out with our team as we speak, if I understood your question correctly. Jamie Bolser, do we need bond counsel? We've got, it's a good question. Part of the, I think Ron mentioned one of the advantages of the bond bank program is we've got counsel here, local unit of government counsel provided. So we'll providing you all the form documents you need. I believe Dennis is on the phone, Brad is on the phone. I don't want to get too far out over my skis and speak for our attorneys, but if, I don't know, Brad or Dennis, you want to speak to the council question?
Yeah, Mark, this is Dennis. I'm happy to chime in here on behalf of the governmental entities participating. As we've done for many years now, our firm acts as QE counsel to the participants in the program. And as the applications are received, we are provided those by the bond bank, and we prepare all the necessary documentation for the participants including their forms of resolutions and agreements and documents that they need signed, and send those out to the participants and coordinate with the participants in getting those returned. And in that capacity, we act as bond counsel to the QEs on the program. So to say it another way, each entity participating is not expected to go out and get separate counsel. We provide that service as part of the program. And Brad, I didn't know if you had anything to offer on what your role is on the bond bank side.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Dennis. You know, Barnes and Thornburg, we serve as bond counsel then to the bond bank at their level with respect to their notes being issued to the market or through private placement. The only other thing I would add to your comments, Dennis, is that just to make clear the cost of the services that you're providing, that's covered by the bond bank and included in the program. So there are no direct out-of-pocket costs for participants in this program.
Thank you both. Yes, I was remiss in mentioning there's no out-of-pocket cost to participate in the program. David, I see a couple of questions from you, and I will turn this, I think, perhaps both over to the team here. You're asking about in terms of incurring interest during the time between disbursement by the bond bank and payoff from the unit. David's asking, did I hear correctly that we only incur interest during the time between disbursement by the bond bank and payoff from the unit? Brad or Angie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the interest would accrue from the closing date, so the date when the funds are actually dispersed, to the date that they're redeemed. So as Mark mentioned, we are working through what that exact structure looks like to see how long your warrants would be outstanding. But whatever that date would be, you would owe interest on the principal you borrowed from the date you receive them until the date that they're paid back.
Just moving to David's next question, which is a great question. Can we borrow against referendum taxes? Angie, you just want to keep rolling on?
And that's an appropriate fund as well, as long as there is a 2020 levy. So if this is a new fund, you had a property tax levy for 2020, this calendar year, then referendum funds are eligible to participate in the program.
Sandra London says she's received 2 different applications, a short one and a long one. I was curious about which one she uses.
Yeah,
Ron,
Sandra.
Hey, Mark, this is Ron. I can handle that. For those entities that have participated in the 2020 Advanced Funding Program, which closed on January, that closed in January, you just need to fill out a supplemental application. Apologize, we've had a lot of working offline. We've had a lot of emails go out, and apologize that both versions of the application were sent out. But for the 2020 Advanced Funding participants, only need to fill out the supplemental application.
And then Sandra has a second question as a follow-up in terms of needing board approval, and I think this speaks to what Dennis was talking about a little bit earlier in terms of getting those approvals and the documents that he provides and works with you on. Will there be leeway in resolution dates? And I think that kind of gets to this overall, we're in a very different time period, and meetings and how to manage meetings. It's just probably a situation that none of us have ever lived through before. So I don't know, Brad or Dennis, do you want to talk about kind of board approval process and what that looks like in terms of the dates that we need things due back by?
This is Dennis. There is some leeway on resolution approval process, but not very much. The one thing that we need to keep in mind is just to make sure that we absolutely have to have resolutions adopted before warrants are issued. So that is something to be thinking about as you're looking at the dates on when you would need funds. If you're targeting that earliest date, you'll need to be coordinating some form of a meeting, and we're all mindful of the challenges that we're facing right now and know the difficulties there. And fortunately, the governor's provided some guidance on that that's helping us accomplish meetings without having physical members present. But to me, that is the one standard is we've got to have those resolutions adopted before you actually get funds. And Brad, I'm not sure if you've got other thoughts you want to share or expand upon that, and how those might relate to the bond bank's actually issuance of its notes.
I completely agree, Dennis, that would have to happen before we could fund monies to a borrower. I think the only nuance I would say is that, what the proceedings required are slightly different based upon the type of political subdivision which you represent. So if you're dealing with a city or a town or county, you may be required to adopt an ordinance, which typically requires 2 separate meetings, unless there's unanimous consent to suspend the rules and adopt it at the same meeting in which it's introduced. So it's just one more procedural layer to add on to the current difficulties in scheduling public meetings.
Thank you both. And Sandra, I hope you took away from that the smaller supplemental application will be what you're filling out as a participant in the most recent advanced funding round. This is really fantastic. Keep these questions coming as we move through them. I think this is as much benefit, hopefully, for you as it is for us to continue to hear your perspective, your thoughts, and where you see the future going. So our next question is from Gina. Gina, if there's minimal interest in any one of the funding windows, could applications for that period be added to a later window? I guess what I would say to that, Gina, is we have certainly had, gosh, even in the last few years, where we've had a closing or disbursement for as few as one entity. So if there's need and you have a particular need to fill it, I don't want you to feel like you need to accommodate or switch your need to a later month, or you're borrowing to a later month, to kind of go with a bigger crowd. So I guess we could certainly talk about that with you if there's only a few folks interested in an earlier round, whether or not waiting makes sense. But as I read the question, I want you to know that if you in those early May, late May, June, or July, we're ready to go for those. And so if you're the only one or one of a couple, we will close and we'll get you your funds on time. If you're asking whether come August or September, if there's potentially only need for one, whether we'd stand up a new round for that, I don't know that we've decided that yet. So we're still gathering that data, but rest assured that if you have a need at a particular time in those existing 4 rounds, we're here to accommodate that and fill it. I hope that answers your question. If I read that the wrong way, please just follow up and we'll tackle that. I have a question on the approval process or timeline for a local unit approving a tax anticipation warrant. Dennis, maybe without diving too deep into the legalese, just give us a high level if you could, and perhaps we can do a deeper dive on a future webinar about kind of legal approval process that you go through, if that'd be of help to this group to have a separate webinar on the legal approval side. But for this call, would you maybe just tackle that, Dennis?
Yeah, certainly, Mark. It's really rather straightforward. For most entities, it's going to consist of the adoption of a resolution or an ordinance, depending on whether you're a school or a city or town. And just to piggyback a little bit on what Brad mentioned, and thinking about timing, for those communities in which an ordinance is required to be approved, if you've got a requirement in your community to consider those over several meetings, and you need funds sooner rather than later, I'd encourage you to start talking to your council members about taking action at one meeting by suspending the rules to get that ordinance adopted, or alternatively trying to schedule special meetings to make sure that the ordinance is approved in a 2-meeting process. And then outside of getting the resolution and ordinance approved for schools, there's a legal notice that needs to be advertised. And I should say that as we provide the documentation to each of the participants, we include with the documentation instructions on exactly what we need to accomplish. And along with myself, we have 2 attorneys, Brenda DeVries and Jacob McClellan, who are available, and you're encouraged to talk to them or email them with any questions you have throughout the process. And we'll be checking in as well to kind of get updates from you on where you're at in the approval process. At the same time that we send to you the ordinance and resolution, you'll have a packet that will include the signature pages to all of the documents and certificates. And these documents are prepared based upon the amount of funds that you're requesting to borrow for each fund that have been reviewed by the CRO team. And we would ask that those be signed, and all of the documents can be returned to us by scan. Email is fine on these documents. And then we'll need the proofs of publication with respect to the school corporations as well. But outside of that, for those of you that have participated in the program before, it'll look and feel exactly like you have done before. And for those that have not and have questions, you can always feel free to reach out to us. We'll certainly be available.
And Dennis, while we've got you, I think a couple have come in on the, so I scroll to the bottom. Not to take things out of order, but I think it makes sense as we're on the theme of resolutions. Dr. Thurston asks, can the resolution be as simple as the board resolves to allow the assistant superintendent to pursue a tax warrant from the Indiana Bond Bank? And piggybacking on that, Janice Malinowski is asking, for cities and towns, how do I know if we need a resolution or an ordinance?
Okay, the first question, we will provide the form of resolution, and if you need it sooner rather than later, let us know. We can work to get that to you, but we do need to have the cash flow information. Part of the goal of this program is to have all of the documents approved by the participating entities looking as uniform as possible. So we get this question from time to time, folks saying, well, can I have kind of a paragraph just authorizing the warrants? And the answer to that is no. We like all of the resolutions to have the same look and feel, and that's helpful to the bond bank as it goes out and markets its larger issue as it gets reviewed by the rating agencies. They know that we're telling them the same message, that all of the QEs have done similar approvals and have similar covenants in the documents. That includes the resolution. So we'll provide that to you, and if you need it sooner rather than later, certainly let us know. We can get it to you. On the question on cities and towns, for cities and towns, it will be an ordinance. And it's for the schools that it will be a resolution.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yes.
A question from Jamie. Can we invest a portion of the disbursement for 30 days to recoup interest incurred until payoff is complete, since we don't know exactly how much we will receive during settlement?
Well, if that question is directed at me, yes, if you close on the warrants and you receive the funds, you can certainly invest those. I'm not sure what return you'll get, but yeah, there's no issue with that.
The only thing, just to jump in there real quick, there are some federal tax regulations that will come into play, and that's something that we can perhaps talk about offline. But you know, the bond bank's financing and also the tax warrants that you're issuing, they will be done on a tax exempt basis for federal income tax purposes, and there will be a yield associated with that. So again, we'll have to just keep that in mind. But to Dennis's point, it's unlikely that you're going to be investing them at or above the yield on the warrants, but we'll have to keep that in mind.
Thank you. I have a question from James Kaufman. This is our first year our city has not obtained a TAW, and also my first year in office as clerk treasurer. Congratulations, James. I think City of Beech Grove, if I remember correctly. So congratulations on your first year in office. And it's an interesting one, isn't it? So the question from James is, should I call before starting the application or just start and hope to know the answers? This feels like a layup, but I will let Ron take this one.
Yeah, this is Ron Mangus with the Bond Bank. If anyone has any questions regarding the program, please reach out to me. It's midyear@imbondbank.com, and that is on our website. And my phone number is 317-233-0091. So if anyone has specific questions, please reach out to me. I'll be glad to answer them and walk them through the process specifically.
Could not have said it better myself. Yes, please do reach out to us. Stefan asked, if we borrow an amount that turns out to be much greater than what we really needed, what are the consequences? The county may do better than collecting taxes than they estimate. So Angie, I think this really starts to get into that cash flow analysis. And, we can take this now, or I don't know if you want to speak on it as we get further into our deep dive.
No, we can talk about that now, Mark. And I understand. I think that's probably a lot of the questions is really just the uncertainty of what to show in your cash flow. I think I can address this in another question that kind of popped up to hit more of these at once. Is that do you want to confirm one of the responses that yes, for those residential homeowners who have their taxes paid by their mortgage companies into their escrows, those will still be due as normal. So those are still to be due on the May 15th deadline and distributed to units by June. So there will be some type of revenue received at normal settlement. You could also have the opportunity to receive any tax payments where folks just go ahead and pay them, on schedule. Now, the amount of taxes that are actually paid from mortgage companies, it really varies across counties throughout the state. There isn't an average percentage. We've seen it vary quite a bit, and we've been working with partners with the counties to kind of get an understanding of what that looks like. And I think also having to caveat that even though a county may collect a certain percentage into their escrow, it really depends on your individual taxing district where your local unit is. So in that case, I think at this point we're saying, estimate maybe worst case scenario so that if everyone would pay late and they wait to pay those taxes in July, that July-August timeframe is when you would expect to see, the full distribution, from that first settlement. I think we'd always encourage, of course, communication with your county auditor who may have a better sense of what that taxing district makeup is, of what to expect on any of those 1% residential units who would pay like normal into June. But for the most part, probably a smaller percentage there. And then the remaining of those taxes coming in July and August. I think it's also important to note, Mark, that even when you submit your cash flow, so say you're working through it now, and you want to try to get a picture of what that looks like. There's going to be time passed where new information becomes available. Perhaps you guys start collecting advanced draws. So there will be opportunities to revise your cash flow. So the bond bank always has you continue, if there's something happen, just to resubmit a revised cash flow, and we can make those changes too on our end.
And with that, this may be a good time. I know we've got a few questions that have certainly filtered in. I want to be responsive to everybody's time on this call. And I think we ought to maybe take this time to move into that a deeper dive in the application and the cash flow. That's what that fourth goal we had on the call. This is fantastic Q&A. We'll commit that questions that continue to come in, we'll capture those and we'll push answers out to everybody on the call. But just for the purposes of, again, being respectful of everyone's time, I do want to make sure that we hit on a deeper dive in our process and the tool that we have available for you. So with that, Alicia, if we can jump to the application. And I think, Angie, if it's good with you, I'm going to.
Sure.
Perfect.
So Alicia will be pulling up the application itself. Let me make this a little larger so that I can see. Go to my window. So I think one of the questions earlier was, I've seen two different applications. So just to reiterate that, if you participated in the Bond Bank's January program, then you are required to just complete your supplemental application. And you'll see it's very streamlined. Basically, just making sure we have the correct contact information and those a couple of base questions when you need funds, and to let us know if anything has materially changed since that initial application. So the application I'm going to quickly walk through just in lieu of time today is a new participant. So if you didn't participate in January, this is the application that you would need to complete. The first page is just basic info, your contact information. We want to make sure we can get a hold of you. Have you check off what type of government unit that you are. Key information on this first page is, of course, the contact information. And Alicia, if you could scroll down so you can see the bottom. And then here you'll see we start asking for when your board meetings are. Those are key because that then gives the dates to Dennis Otten and the BOS team to make sure they get those resolutions and ordinances out to you in time so that your board or council can take the action they need to. A key question towards the bottom application and onto the second page is when you need funds. I know we've alluded to on multiple times throughout the webinar that we are offering a multitude of dates for closing. So this is at this time is when you expect to, that you would need funds. Keep in mind, if you select May 7th and you send your application in, and then maybe you get an advance or something changes and you want to push that back, just always make sure you're communicating with the bond bank. So they're there for open communication. Scrolling down. Here's when you actually select which funds you need to borrow in. If you're not sure, maybe you think you need your general fund and debt service, or maybe you're just not too sure, you can always list those funds and we can take a look. And then if it doesn't make sense to borrow, you don't have to. But this way, at least we know that we're getting the documents that Dennis and his team will draft, and they'll authorize the ability to borrow in those funds. So I always say, if you're not sure, I would just, proceed on the side of caution and go ahead so we can set it up so that it gives you the most flexibility. Some basic questions there. One of the first items that we do need to account and rely on you all to provide is looking at the debt profile. And what we're asking there is, did you already issue tax warrants? Have you done this earlier in the year, or did you do this last year? The purpose really is to make sure we understand what you have outstanding. We want to make sure that we're not loaning against a revenue stream that may already be committed, so we can understand what that looks like. Moving down. Question 2 is asking for your annual debt service payments. So you can always go to your DLGF gateway and download your debt payments so we can get an understanding of what those look like. A lot of these questions are really driven by the need is that this is the information that we have to share when the bond bank goes to issue its note. So when we go out to the open market and get a bond rating, S&P likes to look at this information. So this is why you see some of these questions we do need to count on you from, is really to make sure we're meeting their needs. If you could scroll down, Alicia. Here again is just general information. Are you expecting to issue more debt? And if so, give us an idea of what that looks like. Go ahead and scroll down. Let's go to the next page. Questions at the top, a lot of these are kind of yes, no questions. Have you ever had a default? Really just making sure we understand that kind of where you guys are. Looking at your budgeted sources of revenue. A lot of this you can pull from your fund report or your 1782 to help answer. So I would say make sure as you're filling out maybe this and even the cash flow to have those annual financial reports handy, because that'll be a really good resource as you're looking to fill out this information. And of course, if you're struggling on any of these questions, always feel free to reach out to Ron at the bond bank, and then he'll take a first shot. And if he needs help as well, or if it's something he and I need a tag team, the Crow team is also here to help you answer any questions or provide you in the direction of getting some of these questions answered. Looking at question number 6, this is a really important question. So I do want to take a minute just to point that out, is that you may only want to borrow in your debt service fund. Say that's the only fund you're really concerned with and you feel really good about what your cash position looks like in an operating fund. So here's where you would actually say, you know what, I'm not going to borrow in my operating fund, and I expect that we're going to end the year with $2 million. This is a key question that the rating agencies look at in quite a bit of detail and put a lot of weight on. So I would ask folks to really just think about question number 6. Some ideas of what to do if you're trying to figure that out and say, what am I going to have at the end of the year? Again, you can always kind of start with your beginning cash balance for January 1 of 2020. Add in your estimated property tax levy of what you actually expect to collect. And then using your budget, you can look at your budget itself, add in your estimated revenues from the year, less your expenditures, or looking at that line 11 on your fund report or your 16-line statement. That's a good indication for what your expected cash balance is. So those are also good sources if you're struggling with that question. And again, I'm here to help if you have questions on how to figure that out or just need some assistance and guidance. Looking into question 7, really just looking for your total levy. So that we can pull from your budget order that gives the total amount of you're going to levy for the year. And then if you've received any advances. For some of you who may be wanting to participate early on, that answer to that question could easily be 0. So you may not have received any property taxes yet this year. For others, if you're waiting to participate in the later months, you may have already received a property tax advance from your county. And that's what we'd ask, just to put that dollar value in that blank. Moving down, Alicia. Economic profile. Just let us know if anything is significant that's going on in your area, whether it's a positive, a new business, or maybe it's a negative, maybe a manufacturing plant has closed, and just kind of capture anything that's a worthy note for us to know about. Your large taxpayer information. What we're looking at here is wanting to understand kind of who makes up your tax base. How much is coming from either one large taxpayer or maybe a group of taxpayers. Maybe you have 5 different RV manufacturers in your area, so it's more of an industry base. This information can be obtained from your county auditor, and just reaching out and asking for them to provide you their top 10 taxpayers. And then that information will be collected and included here in question 10. Scrolling down. Question 11 is really looking to see who employs a lot of the your community members. This information is usually best obtained by reaching out to either your city chamber of commerce or maybe your county. So really looking out to see, reaching out to whatever, depending on where you're located. The Chamber of Commerce usually has pretty good information on top employers. Scrolling down. You'll see in the past, if you may have participated, that we've removed a lot of the information as Mark mentioned. So the team internally will be pulling all the historical information as it relates to taxes levied, collected, assessed valuation, circuit breaker loss. All that we're just doing in-house. So we've really tried to streamline the key pieces of information that we need you all to help us provide and get answers to. And then lastly, these few questions here is for school districts, just the enrollment numbers. Those are always important. And then some general continuing disclosure information questions. Just making sure that if you do have a debt outstanding, that you're aware of some of those requirements so we get an understanding of what that compliance looks like. Scrolling down. And then lastly, it's really just kind of giving us some direction on how you need to receive your paperwork. If it's all electronically, this allows Bose, Dennis, and his team to know how to get you the information. And then there's some attachments that we need you also to provide. One is the cash flow, which we'll walk through, and kind of gives you some ideas on what that needs to look like. And then just if you had any help, if anyone helped you fill out the application, to of course include their information here. That way, if we have any follow-up, we then also know who else to reach out to help ease the burden on you as well in case you did have assistance. And that really is the full complete application. So you'll see there's 8 pages of application, yet the information that we're really looking for is probably closer to 3 to 4 pages. And a lot of that too is information that you'll have handy. If this was a supplemental application, that application I think itself is 4 pages. So then it's 2 pages of information. So we're really looking to make this as streamlined as possible for anyone who participates. Any questions on the application? We've seen any of those come in? I don't think so. So not seeing anything on the application, I think we'll go to the cash flow. Thanks, Alicia. If we could scroll up, there we go. So the cash flow itself is for 3 years. And what it is, it allows us to want to review and analyze 2 years of your historical data and then a projection of 2020. So what you see here is your 2018. And I would recommend pulling your annual financial report because that's going to have a lot of the information that you need. And that's going to be a good resource as you complete this cash flow. I'd also would state is that I know sometimes it seems like a lot to want to have to complete this information. So I would just encourage folks to use this as an ongoing tool, because I think you could find it beneficial that if you track this then on an ongoing basis, it could be something that you use as part of your toolkit to have a good handle on what your cash flows are. I'm just going to walk through kind of each of these items to give you guys a sense of what we need and what type of information gets included here. So the first page of our cash flow, you'll see at the top, you'll write your name, entity's name, your contact information, telephone, and email. To the right is where you'll include the fund. So if you're participating in the general fund, you would write in general in that cell. Or if this is a debt service fund, you would write debt service. It's key that each fund that you need to borrow in, each fund will need to have its cash flow. So we have to look at these on an individual basis. If you go to that first cell that's yellow, all those that are yellow are ones that we need you to input. Everything else then is a formula. So those that actually need you to key in numbers are all highlighted yellow. So what you would do here is have your 2018 annual financial report in front of you. And I'm going to pretend this is my general fund. I'm going to hard code that beginning balance and actually enter that into that cell. I then am going to look at the types of revenues I need to disclose. I need to know my property taxes, which you can pull from that report. Any state aid. What we're thinking there is mostly applicable to schools. That's your tuition support. So if you're a city or town, state aid may not mean anything, and that's okay. You can leave that blank. Your 2018 bond bank warrants. If you borrowed in the past, that's where you would have that borrowing, the receipt. If you had a loan, maybe you had a loan from another bank, maybe you had an interfund loan from another fund, you would show that receipt, and then everything else. So we're not asking you to break down all of your expenses by a lot of different line items. Really, we want to be able to see the property tax revenues, other loans, and then everything else can get lumped in to that one line. Same for expenditures. Expenditures, we're looking for your wages and salaries. So really that category 1 from your budget. Again, any loan repayments, whether it was to the bond bank or to other temporary loans, and all other expenditures. So that when I get to my cumulative fund balance at the end of 2018, that December 31 balance should match the ending cash balance on your annual financial report. Again, that's just a check. It lets you know that you have all the information entered correctly. Then if you scroll to the right, you'll see it's the exact same information for 2019. Same information gets inputted. All said and done, you want to make sure that that ending cumulative fund balance for December matches how you actually ended the year in that particular fund for December 31 of 2019. Both of those are the historical cash flows that I was referring to. We now move into the third portion of the cash flow, and this is the projection piece. This is where we actually want to determine what is that cash flow need you're going to have. Where are you going to have any shortfalls? And one question I have is on the property tax line, do you include your CVETs, your FIT excise? We would ask you to include those in your other receipts. What I want to be able to do when I look at the cash flow is we need to be able to compare that certified fund levy to the property tax line itself. That allows us to know what is your average tax collection percentage. So if you have questions on other types of tax revenues, all those would just get thrown into that all other line. The only thing we see in the property tax line is indeed actual property tax collections from your certified tax levy and tax rate. So looking into 2020, again, you would pull your certified fund levy, your estimated circuit breaker. If you're unsure what that loss is, you can leave that blank and then we'll pull that information. So if that becomes a struggle on figuring what that is, I would just encourage you to leave that as is. And then the Crow team will work with the bond bank and we'll complete that portion for you. So don't get hung up on trying to figure out what that actual circuit breaker loss is per fund. We'll work on that. Looking into the information, you'll see a lot of it is about the same. You're going to enter your actual receipts and expenditures for the months of January and February. And then you have to do some estimation. So then we get into the month of March. It looks like we maybe have a couple column hidden there. But you would then estimate out your cash flows from March through the end of the year. A good way to look at that is to pull and see what your authorizing body approved for your 2020 budget. Take that less what's already spent or what's been received, and then take that over the time period. For some of you, it may be easier because perhaps you have equal expenditure timelines. You pay the same amount for wages. Others, it may vary. Like if you have different needs and different wages, maybe you have a parks fund where it's heavier during the summertime, or a school where you have summer month pay. So just keep that in mind as you're filling out those expenditures and those revenues. And once this information is completed, what we'll do is really look at the bottom half of your cash flow. And this will also dictate how much you're able to borrow. The program limits you to the lesser of your maximum deficit. So really when you have that cash flow need, or 80% of your tax collection. So for example, if you collected monies in the month of December, we're going to limit you to 80% of those property tax collections or your largest deficit. And all of this and that information is formulaic, and we'll calculate that for us based on your inputs to the actual cash flow. A key thing to keep in mind as you're completing this is to not include your estimated borrowing from this mid-year tax warrant program. We actually want to be able to see a negative in that cumulative fund balance, because that tells us how much you actually need to borrow and what month you need those funds. Let's see if we have any questions coming in. I see another one down here. Have a question from a school. Let's see, we are a school corporation that uses the waiver program so we can move funds to our operations from debt service. I think if there are instances like that you are under a waiver program, I would say to go ahead and set your cash flow up as you expect the year to look, and then provide that information when you submit your application, or provide an additional email of any special circumstance or something we need to look at. That just helps us in our review, so we have an understanding then when we look at your cash flow to understand what you're trying to tell us. So I would just say to go ahead and do your cash flow as expected, and then if there are certain circumstances, then just to make sure those are known in your application, whether in the comment section or just in the email to the bond bank, and they share that information with the Crow team as well. Are there any questions on cash flows?
Hey, Angie, this is
Yep.
Ron. There are several questions about how to project cash flows or projecting property tax distribution, especially since escrow accounts will be paying most likely timely and those will not. If you could address how to do projections of when property taxes will be distributed, that should answer 2 or 3 of the questions that we've received.
Sure. So again, it's when you're looking at that tax distribution, when should you show that first receipt? So I think I'd hit on this earlier when I had suggested always kind of getting an understanding of how much of your taxing district actually has the escrows paid by a mortgage. I think you can also get a good sense of looking back to prior years, especially if you're an entity that has received in advance. You could then begin to show maybe a small portion of your property tax receipts in the month of June. And then the remaining, though, of that major distribution, I would suggest showing either in July or more so even the month of August. That way you're covered in case taxes are less than you expect or delay, that you have the funds so you don't run into any cash flow shortfalls, and then you would repay those monies then when that distribution is received. Let's see. One question is, you expect to go negative in the middle of June. How do we show that based on the monthly grid? So that question has come up and something we've seen before in the past. We look at cash flows on a monthly basis. So the concern is, well, gosh, what if my deficit's in the middle or at the beginning and I don't show a deficit, but no, I need to. I would suggest just pushing some of those receipts then that you normally would get in June into July, or pulling some of those expenditures forward just to make sure then that you know you're getting the monies when you need to. So that's how I would address for some of those cash flow deficits that may not be reflected on the monthly basis just from timing. And that's how we've addressed those in the past. One of the questions is about the escrowed accounts. What does that look like for each county? We have started working on pulling some of that information and working with AIC on getting that. It may be worth just a call to your county auditor and just say, hey, we're working on estimates. Do you know at this time a best estimate for us on what percentage we could have maybe try to assume in June? I think a lot of that information we're going to start working on, and we're going to start seeing that come in probably in May. I think a lot of folks, from what I'm hearing, are going to start requesting for advanced draws. So we'll start seeing some of those come in. But I think, like I said earlier, you can always assume worst case scenario. And then if information does come in, then we can adjust your cash flow and pull some of those taxes forward. Ron, are you seeing other questions?
There's a question about what funds can you borrow from? Can you borrow from utility funds and TIF funds?
And I think we've hit on those, I think, already. I think at this point, this mid-year program and this cash flow template is built for a property tax levy and set up that way. So at this time, this particular program would not provide for those funds unless, for example, on your TIF, you actually have a levy in place. So maybe it's a TIF/special benefits tax where there's a tax levy. I think that's a discussion I think, as Mark had mentioned, as a team, we're going to continue to have to see if there are ways to assist with those type of needs. However, those would be outside of this program that we're talking about today.
Angie, there's also a question about repayment of your tax warrants, and can you pay that from your debt service fund? Can you pay the interest from your debt service fund?
I think given that one, I'll see if Dennis has any I'll turn it over to Bose to see what their thoughts are on actual repayment of those, of how that's set up in the QE warrant agreements.
Yeah, this hasn't been an issue before. And this is, I think, the first time we've been asked this question, but for the schools, it can be paid from the debt service fund, or it can be paid from their operating fund, or whatever fund you draw the warrants on. We don't think you need to make an appropriation, and the documents clearly authorize the payment of principal and interest from the fund. We typically do kind of put an allowance in the documents that if you want to, you can pay it from the debt service fund, but we don't think you need to make a separate appropriation for that purpose.
Thanks, Dennis.
There's one more question that I will address regarding what if you need money later in the year. I think Mark has addressed that. We show our last closing in late July, but if you need funds in April, or excuse me, in August or later, we will address those needs. So if you need funds in late 2020, the bond bank will be there to serve you. We just need to have an indication of when you think you need those funds so we can properly set up the program and have the process set up for you.
Right. To piggyback on that question, Ron, what I think since we have that last application on the timeline showing May 22nd, if we have an August, September, October, or so on rounds available, we'll let you know that before May 22nd, and so we'll have those kind of trickle on dates down further. So we'll know before May the 22nd. If those rounds were to open up, what those new dates for application and cash flow and all those would be set in advance of what's currently the final date. So Ron's exactly right on that.
And I see a couple of questions I'll try to hit too. I think we had one regarding estimating your December 31 cash balances for non-participating funds. Yeah, Brian, you do not have to assume that you spend every dollar down, because I know that in many cases that's not the case. So I would say, I suggest using your budget. Really, it's just kind of a baseline to help make that analysis. And then if you know that you retain additional fund balance, then I would include that in your operating. That's really just an estimate. So do whatever makes the most sense for your entity. If you do know that you're not going to spend every single dollar that's authorized by your board, don't assume you spend it then for purposes of cash balance. That just helps the program itself as well, because it does show a stronger cash balance for your entity. Question on here regarding, are counties required to advance funds? They are not. So counties are not required to advance. However, unless the unit actually makes a request to the county treasurer. So the bond bank is looking to help streamline that process. But right now the process is, if you're a government unit that you do by statute have the ability to request an advance draw up to 95% of your distribution. So when county auditors receive that, that directive, then they do actually advance those money. Though there isn't anything that I've seen thus far that they just do it on their own. That wasn't addressed in the most recent order. I don't know, Brad, if you want to add anything to that as well, because I know you've been really keyed in on that process.
No, thanks, Ange. That question has come up several times, and I agree with everything you said. As it stands as of now, there is not a requirement that an auditor or treasurer provide that advance if it's requested. I think the auditor of state has sent out some guidance to all 92 county auditors requesting that they do so, that they do provide an advance in the mid-August timeframe, in recognition of the taxes that are collected following the end of the 60-day waiver period. That's just one of those things the bond bank will continue to monitor and do what we can to kind of help push that along, so that, again, recognizing that delay is caused by the 60-day waiver.
Thanks, Brad. See, there was another question, it looks like, on estimating miscellaneous revenue. I think there is that uncertainty whether revenues are going to come in exactly like everyone's thinking, given the market and just the environment that we're living in. So I think you could start off by looking at what you had estimated at the beginning of the year of what was approved for your budget, and then look at that. And then if you're not comfortable, you could always make a reduction into those revenues and to reduce those to be safe. I wish I could tell you the exact percentage. I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anything come out yet from the state on direction on those revenues, which really is a good source for that information yet. So I think at this point, we ask you guys to use your best estimates of what you know and just what you know at the time. And if information does come out on state revenues, then we can always have constant communication with the group on any changes that need to be made. But as of right now, it's kind of using your best guess on what that cash flow would look like. Looks like we have one question, and Dennis, this was a question that had came up in an email to you that I had posed yesterday. So do you want to hit this one up?
Sure, Ange. Is this the,
This is
I can't see the question.
Oh, this has to do with additional appropriation. So it says, would we have to do an additional appropriation of debt service fund in order to pay the interest? Because they currently didn't know about the tax warrant and didn't have an appropriation for short-term interest.
Oh, yeah, okay, and I think I may have addressed this earlier, but our view is you need to do an additional appropriation for that. As long as you've got money in your debt service fund that you can use to pay obligations, we think that you could use that to go ahead and pay the interest on the warrants. And we've also got throughout the documents authorization for payment of principal and interest, and this is covered in the resolution that gets adopted by the board. So as long as there's sufficient funds in there for that purpose, you should be fine.
I'm not seeing any other questions coming in.
Very good. You want to, at least you want to advance the slide to, gosh, I think we've, hopefully that spirit has been very clear. What questions might we answer? I've gone through those questions, and really thank you all as we look to wrap. Please complete the participation survey if you think this program may be a resource. Local government around the state and you as local leaders are, the pulse of Indiana. I mean, the communities that we live in, the schools that our children attend, the libraries we visit, the police and fire services, you are all just the fundamental fabric of this state. And I know I speak for the treasurer in that regard. I speak for the entire bond bank team, that anything we can do to serve you as we navigate these interesting times, this is what this team is here for. This is why we exist. And so, again, please view us as a resource. We hope that you found this information helpful, and that if you have any further questions about the advanced funding program, Indiana Bond Bank, or ways we might assist you during this COVID-19 time, please do not hesitate to reach out. We've got midyear@indianabondbank.com. all our team is responsive. Our phone numbers still will ring directly to us. And so we are here to serve you. So please reach out, take advantage of the program, the resource that we have available here. And we hope to talk to you very soon. Thank you.